Hello and welcome back to In the Dugout and to episode 9 of the Dugout Debate. My name is Josh and as usual I'm joined by my fellow presenters, partisans and pundits and my pals to a certain extent, Chris and Alex. And as usual we're kicking off with a round involving a picture. It is of course Picture This, involving a rather youthful looking Wayne Rooney. So lads, picture this.
Sorry, can we just point out that you didn't ask us how we were? You rude
Once
person.
again, I don't actually care. If I wanted to know, I'd have asked.
Is that why you asked the previous take?
Pardon?
Is that why you asked the previous take before you realised you'd messed up? Anyway, we do this all one take, it's fine. I'll go first. So the Rooney picture, is that the first ever episode of Fake Football Pitch?
I feel like this would be Wayne's reaction after he did his D.O.V. helping out in the old people's home.
Oh my God.
You know what, Chris, to quote a certain person, for someone who's not very funny, that was actually quite... inside jokes. Is it, because it kind of looks like Tony Hibbert's giving a kind of a Dracula bite. Is that Tony Hibbert giving Wayne Rooney gingivitis?
Yeah. So moving on.
Or is this Wayne? I'm thinking this slightly differently. Perhaps Wayne's actually annoyed because someone else has now said, "This is my swamp."
That was the previously mentioned Shrek joke.
Oh, you, Chris, you. What are you like, Chris? You little devil, you.
I feel like we're being so much media today. Anyway, no, it's Wayne Rooney. Is that Wayne Rooney celebrating his famous goal against Arsenal?
It is, because I mentioned it in the last take. Whoops.
Yeah, I'm really glad you did, because I didn't know.
So yeah, obviously, Wayne Rooney, 16 years of age, celebrating his first ever Premier League goal for Everton against Arsenal, who I believe were the reigning champions at that point. Quite a massive thing. He was the youngest Premier League scorer ever at that moment in time. He earned himself a 30 odd million pound move to Manchester United in 2004. But many argue that he hasn't quite fulfilled his potential, despite having a long career at Manchester United and becoming England captain, breaking both scoring records in the process. But my question to you, I'll start with you, Chris. The person whose both of whose records he broke, Bobby Charlton, has described him as a true great. Do you think he will go down as a true great?
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, the level of commitment that he has shown to both Manchester United and the England national team is beyond incredible. I mean, he is, even when he's perhaps not been fully fit, he's been perfectly happy to go with the England squad and serve as the captain and then come on and do the job that he's meant to do. He is a workhorse. And even though now that he's not got the same fitness as he used to back when he was playing as a striker, and he's now far more in the midfield area, when he does get game time, you can still see that he has this exact same passion that he did when he was a youngster, especially after the quite spectacular free kick that ended up breaking Sir Bobby Charlton's record. I think it was against Stoke.
Yeah.
That was a magnificent free kick. And you could clearly see what it meant to Rooney. And I think Bobby Charlton was also watching in the crowds at the fantastically named Bet365 Stadium. But that's another story. But Wayne Rooney will definitely go down as one of England's greatest players. Perhaps not in the same level of class as someone like Sir Bobby Charlton, but that may just be because of how different modern football is compared to back when Sir Bobby was playing.
But Alex, do you think that breaking those goal-scoring records alone is enough to warrant the title of a true great? Or do you think that there's another factor that Wayne Rooney possesses or has possessed earlier on in his career that are conducive to being branded an all-time legend?
I struggle with Wayne Rooney because if someone asks me just straight off the bat, if I'm not thinking about any records or statistics or anything, and someone goes, is Wayne Rooney a true great? I immediately say no. At no point has he ever been the best player in the league, in my opinion. To be honest, apart from Euro 2004, where he burst on scene, had a brilliant tournament, I don't think he's ever really been the best player in the England team. But the statistics don't lie. He's the all-time top scorer for arguably one of the most, if not the most prestigious football club in world football, as much as it pains me to say it. and he's England's all-time top goal scorer, and he's overtaken people like Bobby Charlton in order to achieve those kind of records. And you can't argue with that, and it's difficult to put my finger on it, but I struggle to describe him as a true great because, for me, over a number of years, he's performed consistently and he's got the goals. And he's been in the United team long enough to break their record, and he's been the England team, obviously having not changed his nationality, long enough in order to do that, because he broke onto the scene at age 16 for Everton and started playing for England, aged, 17 or 18? Something like that?
Yeah.
But for me, he's never been truly, truly outstanding. Like, even now, I wouldn't put him as a true great either at the moment. Obviously, it's still early in his career, but like Eden Hazard has been PFA Player of the Year at some point, clearly the best player in the league a couple of years ago. And for me, Wayne Rooney's never done that. I think he's been consistent, but having loyalty to a club and, you know, playing there for a number of years, to me, doesn't make someone an all-time legend. Lucas Leiva's done that for Liverpool. Lucas Leiva's also passionate about Liverpool, but Lucas Leiva ain't an all-time great. Yeah. For me, Rooney's just missing that spark where he was the best to make him an all-time great for me.
It's enough to make you a club legend, but not perhaps a true legend.
Well, yeah, I think there's a difference between club legends and all-time greats. I think, like, when you look back at it, for me, the club legend doesn't necessitate talent. For me, I will absolutely love Lucas Leiva forever. He's not the most talented football player, but he's put in a shift for Liverpool, and he's stayed there for 10 years, and he's come in and done the job when he's needed to and showed passion for the club. He's not the most talented footballer, and he's messed up a bunch of times, but I still love him for that, and for me, that makes him a club legend.
But doesn't that make him more of a cult hero than an actual legend? Because if you think about a legend, it's a player that's an amazing player that's served his club really well. Lucas Leiva is not an amazing player; he's an all right player that's served his club for a decent amount of time.
Yeah.
Whereas with Wayne Rooney, for example, he will never, I imagine, get a stand named after him at Old Trafford like Sir Bobby Charlton. So my question to you, I'll go back to you, Chris, is Bobby Charlton went down in the United folklore for being the record appearance maker and goal scorer at his time. Those were records that stood for decades. Do you think, given the way that modern football has developed, for good or for bad, better or for worse, that Wayne Rooney's career became dominated by financial greed, and that's perhaps why he won't go down as, or a factor as to which he won't go down as such a club legend as Charlton has?
Quite possibly. I mean, Rooney is, without a doubt, one of the highest paid footballers around. And I suppose it also helps Bobby Charlton's case that while he was at United, he was achieving things with United in terms of like their firsts. Am I right in saying that Sir Bobby was part of the team that won United's first
European Cup?
European Cup.
Yeah.
So yeah, that definitely helps to cement a player as not just a club legend but a true great when they're the first of perhaps a group of players, when they're the first to achieve something with their club. Wayne Rooney breaking the all-time goal scoring record and the all-time appearance record, that's not necessarily the same thing, because that anyone can do that with enough given time, which Wayne Rooney has certainly had with United and the England squad. But going back to talking about this sort of greed, there's certainly been that there with Rooney. I mean, there were times when he was threatening to even leave United unless he got a bigger paycheck. So while Rooney certainly does love the club, there's no doubt about that, he also does love the fat stack in his pocket.
A final question on Wayne Rooney, Alex, or maybe Chris can pitch in with an opinion as well.
Not really.
You know what the question is yet? Stop quoting me. Do you think he moved to Manchester United too early in his career?
It's really difficult to say, because it was a very different climate of football back then when he moved. Well, when did he move? Was it 2004?
Yeah.
Is that right? He moved 2004. And it's a very different climate to somebody moving at age 16 or 17 nowadays, because, like, I don't know what... Obviously, he moved for a very large amount of money, but I don't know what wage he immediately started getting at Manchester United. But I'm pretty confident in saying that it was probably less than 100 grand a week.
Well, yeah.
And, like, you see people like Raheem Sterling moving purely for the sake of money. possibly to win trophies as well. Obviously, he's going to win more trophies at City than Liverpool, or at least at that particular point in time certainly looks like it. But I think when a player is hungry for success, there's never a wrong point in time to move. If you're moving for money at age 18 when you're not properly developed as a footballer yet, and you need more time to sort of get into it, then fair play, I'd say it's too early. But Wayne Rooney, I can bemoan him. I can say he's less talented than people have said he is and whatever, but I can't deny that his hunger for the game is, at points in his career, has been almost unmatched. The dude's incredibly passionate about football. I think when you have that passion, and when he moved, he was also close to being the player he was going to be anyway. He was the mold of player he was going to be. And he had that main thing about him, which was his aggression and hunger. I don't think you can argue that it was too early because he sort of had his main attribute by that point. And therefore, I think that he probably couldn't have moved at the wrong time. So I think he was kind of an idea of the player he was going to be already by that point.
Very, very valid arguments from both of you. Doing well. I'm impressed. So because we had the international break, and just to avoid talking about
and the international break.
Lafrey, when I'm talking, you don't.
Oh, sorry, Dad.
It's okay, son. Because we had the international break, and just to avoid repeating ourselves about saying our opinions on the teams week in, week out, I thought we would have two dugout debates this week. And the first one, in light of talking about Wayne Rooney, is which player in history of world football we think didn't quite manage to fulfill their potential that they garnered as a youngster. And we're talking about sort of the players who had the biggest potential and failed to live up to it. So I'll start with Chris, who will name his player and a short, and I mean short,
I'm the best.
sort of description as to why, and then Alex, and then I will do my own. So Chris?
Well, my choice is the Portuguese winger, Ricardo Quaresma. I could go on night and day about his ridiculous tattoos, particularly the bloody teardrop he has. But
obviously contributing to why he's a bad player.
Oh, yeah, of course. If you're making those sorts of poor choices, you're not going to go very far. But no, Ricardo Quaresma, he came through very promising at Sporting. He was a key part in their League and Cup double in 2001-02. He made 28 appearances and 3 goals, which admittedly doesn't sound great, but let's bear in mind he is still a winger.
Yeah. So,
of course, he's not going to be the main striking option. But then after that, the cracks began to show with him.
Okay. Is that it? Or he's frozen?
I think he's frozen.
Is everything okay?
You tell us.
I felt like I was just lagging a bit.
Yeah. Okay.
You just keep freezing.
We'll leave Chris there. He can add some points on later.
Hello?
Yeah. Bye.
Hello.
Yeah. All right.
Hello.
Yeah. All right. All right. We get it.
I feel like Sergio Aguero knocking at the door.
Good joke, Chris.
Do you feel, Josh, do you feel like Chris is a little bit behind us? Because I feel like that's why he keeps shouting over us.
Yeah. Well, we'll move on to you, Alex, and maybe Chris will join us anon.
Yeah.
So go on, Alex. Who's your player?
So my player, a little bit controversially, it's not the best pick I've ever made, if I'm being totally honest, is Theo Walcott. And the reason I'm saying this is not because necessarily he's had less of a successful career than the players Chris and Josh will bring. Arguably, perhaps less of a successful career than Quaresma after the Euro 2016 success with Portugal. But for me, the reason why Walcott as a prospect is such a flop is because he was, for so long, everyone was saying, he's a prospect, he's a prospect, he's a prospect. He was thrown into the 2006 England World Cup squad, in my opinion, far too early in his career. Sat on the bench, didn't really get any game time. But from that point on, 17 years old, it was like, right, prospect. And from sort of the ages of 17 to 23, it was like, oh, he's still young, he'll come good, he'll come good. And he's now 27 years old, I think. He might be 28 now. And he just really hasn't become the player that anyone thought he was going to be. He scored 63 goals in 255 games for Arsenal, which for somebody who is considered a striker or a winger, in my opinion, isn't particularly good. He scored 1847 for England, which again isn't particularly good. And he's never really achieved a particularly large amount of success with Arsenal, nor with the England team, nor, in my opinion, has he achieved a lot of personal success. And And for me, and obviously I'm going to keep it short, I'm not going to go into everything, because otherwise Josh will beat me afterwards. But
You know it.
just for me, the amount of hype around him for the extended period of time he was is just nowhere near justified by the amount of actual material success he's actually achieved in his career.
Okay, well, I'm going for Adriano, who I think often gets touted as a player that never quite fulfilled the potential that was put upon him as a youngster. Very early on in his career, he enjoyed success in his native Brazil. That attracted interest from Inter Milan, where he spent a season. Then he went to Italy, and he sort of flitted between Italy and Brazil, and then went to Roma, Corinthians, Atletico Paranaense, and then Miami United to end his career. But he never actually set the world alight in the way that he was expected to. On his day, he was potentially the best player in the world. But to be the best player in the world, you have to be someone that's performing at that high level week in, week out on a consistent basis. If you look at the players that were playing around the time that he sort of started up in 2000, you got, the fat Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, Zinedine Zidane, those sort of players were world-class players because they were just fantastic all the time. They were consistent. Whereas Adriano showed glimpses of being a good player, but never quite carried that through consistently. And yeah, he did win the odd trophy here and there. And I remember even in Pro Evolution Soccer in one of these, he's got like the maximum shot rating.
99 shot.
So I think the thing is they do put some research into. There is some actual statistics behind giving these ratings. So for him to go from that being the best, according to him, the best player in the world in terms of shooting for a striker, to ending his career or even considering his career the way he did, I think speaks volumes. So this is the point where we now challenge each other's arguments. Chris, you want to start?
Can I just throw up a really quick excuse? So I just realised I made a mistake in the sense of on the group chat that we sort of have where we prepare these. I was like, "Is it Premier League only?" And I thought you'd said yes, when in reality you hadn't answered. And I probably wouldn't have picked Theo Walcott if I thought we could do.
Didn't I say worldwide?
Who would you have
I don't know.
You did say worldwide.
Yeah.
Probably Freddie Adu, to be honest, but I think it's a bit late for me to go.
No.
It's a bit late for me to go Freddie Adu on your now. So, so I'll sort of, for the sake of the game, keep up the debate. But I would like to apologise in advance for my poor selection of Theo Walcott.
Or just your inability to read. Go on then, Chris.
Well, let me just disclaim that I am now up to date. I'm now caught up. So, as I was saying,
welcome to In the Dugout.
So yeah, I think Mr. Dembele is
Oh my god, Chris, make points.
So
as I
was saying, Ricardo Quaresma had shown a lot of promise in his early time at Sporting, but then after that the cracks began to show. He after his first season, he only ended up going on to play another 31 more games and score 5 more goals. He earned a move to Barca for €6 million, and in his first season he only made 10 starts and 11 sub-appearances with just 1 goal, then went on to refuse to play while Frank Rijkaard was still in charge. So you're starting to get a player who's not only not proving themselves, but is also starting to show themselves up as a bit of a chump, someone who may be a bit too big for their own boots. But then this just went on.
Stormzy by Chris Fowler.
Yeah. This that sort of attitude then began to follow Quaresma around. His next move was to Porto for 15 million plus the playing rights of 6 million. He was incredibly selfish in his early time at Porto, just trying to dribble around defenders rather than making simple pass or whatever.
Chris, if we wanted to read, if we wanted to read the Wikipedia page of a football player or something, we'd probably go and watch Club Core. I literally just read that exact sentence on the Wikipedia page.
I will give you that one. That was quite good.
We've done it, boys. We've reached the peak. We've reached the pinnacle.
Pinnacle like Ethan, eh?
No one gets that joke, Chris.
We've made enough in-jokes in this bloody show.
Guys, Go on,
Right.
Chris, go on, carry on.
No,
carry on.
forget Chris. Alex, you
No, no.
carry on. You put your argument across.
So I've kind of made my Premier League Theo Walcott bed. I kind of have to lay in it now. So I'll try and make a case for Theo Walcott. The reason why I think potentially you could argue that Theo Walcott is perhaps more of a flop than these two is because of the way in which I think Theo Walcott's career has flopped. Because I wouldn't say Walcott has flopped as a result of injuries. He's had injuries in his career, don't get me wrong. But I think he's flopped as a result of people just hugely overestimating his talent, or perhaps he not just simply living up to the potential that he had. Whereas I think that Quaresma's thing is not necessarily not living up to his talent, but perhaps attitude problems, as Chris mentioned. And I think Adriano was very much struck by injury and then perhaps attitude problems as well, gaining a lot of weight over the course of the thing. Because don't get me wrong, I have absolutely no doubt that in terms of potential talent to what they ended up producing, I think that Adriano and Quaresma are both significantly more interesting picks than Theo Walcott. Because Adriano, part of the thing about Adriano was that I think for a very brief period of time, he perhaps did live up to his potential. I think that he showed his potential, and at a point he was playing, like you say, as one of the most unplayable strikers in the world. It was just that he didn't sustain it for nearly as long a period of time as he could have done. And Quaresma, I think, did show flashes of brilliance throughout his career. He was as good as any, apart from possibly Pepe, because Ronaldo really wasn't great in the Euros 2016 either. He was as influential as any other Portugal player in Euro 2016, where they did go and win a major trophy, something that Theo Walcott has never done. And I just think both those players at some point have been influential and brilliant. They've had brilliant points in their career, which is something that I just don't think Theo Walcott has ever had. And I think, again, just the fact that brilliance never, ever has showed up is the reason why I think that he's genuinely, having thought through it a little bit, a slightly less horrendous pick than I initially thought.
If I'm going to shut out the argument about Theo Walcott, he was thrusted into the England team as a 16-year-old. He then joined Arsenal, I think, that following summer. Was that what gave him the potential as a youngster? Because for me, he's never ever really hit the heights. I've never watched him and think, oh my God, he's an amazing player. Even as a young player, I didn't think, oh, he's one to watch for the future. I've just thought, he's not a bad player, and he just maintained that throughout his entire career. So I just wonder if it was his age alone and the fact that he was thrusted into the limelight without real reason, that was why he garnered so much potential in the first place.
I feel like it also helps that he came through Southampton's youth academy, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yes.
Southampton have been absolutely tremendous with producing young talent, so I feel like that may have also influenced Arsenal's decision to buy him. Just like, oh, well, Southampton have released loads of good young players. This one's probably going to be the same.
I think he was probably the first of the sort of mass that we've seen in the last 10 years, though, really.
Yeah. I think part of the potential issue with Walcott, which I will be prepared to accept, and if this therefore sort of nullifies the argument, then fair play, is the fact that I think it depends on whether we're talking about a player actually living up to the potential they actually had or the potential that everyone perceived them to have. If we're talking about a player living up to the potential that they actually realistically had, then I will 100% totally concede that Adriano and Quaresma are both better picks than Theo Walcott. However, I think in terms of, if we're talking about somebody who flopped in terms of the fact that they did show a bit of potential, how much the potential was perhaps hyped and how much we perceived them to be potentially great players for the future, and then how they actually performed. And I think that it was a classic young England player syndrome where the English media, being as ridiculous as they always have been with footballers, seeing a 17-year-old burst onto the scene. At that point, 17 years old, showed signs of being a reasonable finisher at Southampton, which to this day he still is okay at. Incredible speed, and at that point, like I say, totally fearless. He's 17, he runs at defenders. And English journalists, whenever they see anybody like that, just sort of go, oh my God, direct English winger who can also score goals. Ballon d'Or, 5 years' time, calling it. And I think that perhaps if Theo Walcott had been Spanish, if he was Theo Walcotto, we would not be talking about him. But I think in the situation that we are in, if we're talking about how we perceive them as spectators of the sport, then I think he is a decent pick in terms of how much he was hyped up for the performance he actually gave.
Okay. Any last words, Chris? I think we probably ought to move on for time.
Any last words, because you're dead.
Because you're about to get kicked.
You mean, yeah, I was going to say, you're just going to chuck me out again, throw me.
Josh just noticed that no one's managed to say a bad thing about Adriano.
No, can't. It's
No, because it's a really solid pick.
Winner!
It's really one day, it's fine.
Yeah, well, that's...
To be honest, like I say, given the circumstances, I can see, because Adriano's just a solid pick. Fair play to you, son.
Okay. So nothing else, no one got anything else to add? Perfect. Okay, so we can move on to our...
Gives loads of time to answer.
move on to our phrase of the week, which is the only part of today's episode which is actually relating to the last 7 days in football. And our phrase of the week is, even though you're a woman. Lads, what could this relate to?
Chris, you've got more than me, so I'll let you go first.
I feel like this is Moyes just after he took the Sunderland job. He's like, I've got bigger balls than you, even though you're a woman.
Josh looks so unimpressed by that. Just
He's got that same sort of smirk on his face that he had when he was just giggling uncontrollably in episode 4.
Do you know what it is, though? He's going to look disappointed until one of us makes a legitimately sexist joke.
I beg to differ. I think David Moyes is a wonderful man, and anyone that says anything against him is,
Josh, Josh, okay, I got you. Even though you're a woman, it's how every driving instructor prefaces a girl's past driving test. Even though you're a woman, we'll let you drive legally. But against bad judgment.
If you were going to go down the sexist route, you could have done a bit better than that.
I'm trying to keep it fairly PG, okay? I know no one watches these, but African viewers...
In Burundi.
Yeah.
Kyle Pigarimada scoring the Checker Trade Trophy.
Oh my god.
Any other suggestions,
I feel like this could be Mourinho saying, I'm throwing you out of the medical staff, even though you're a woman.
Sure, it's because you're a woman.
Mate, Mourinho's a lady killer. Don't even try it.
Isn't that CeeLo Green?
Stop it. That's just dead. It's even though you're a woman, the preface to Chris agreeing to sex for the first time. Like, a woman after sex is like, you know what, I'm this desperate, even though you're a woman. I'll take it.
He's sitting there thinking, what sex?
Well, I'm glad he's gone. So now we can actually have a good episode of the Dugout today.
Oh my dear God. This is like one massive outtake.
This entire episode's just gone.
I hope you're happy.
Here we are. Right, anyone got
just like you agreeing to sex with a woman finally.
Okay,
anyone got the actual answer, or have you got another suggestion?
No, I have one more.
Okay.
Okay.
Even though you're a woman, you shouldn't be insulted that I've asked you to make me a sandwich.
Oh my god. Fair play.
Lavrie, the actual answer?
No.
Sandwich equality for all.
Before we start getting into a political SJW bashing debate, Alex, have you got the actual answer, please?
The actual answer is how David Moyes prefaced saying he was going to slap a female supporter. Even though you're a woman, I will slap you.
Yes, it was, of course, David Moyes, controversially, because some people don't think it was that bad a thing, me included, him saying to a female reporter, I'll give you a slap even though you're a woman. My question to you, I'll start with you, Alex, is do you think, based on those comments, that he deserved to keep his job?
Literally, I think there's been such an overreaction to this. I think that my issue with this whole situation is that people have focused on the even though you're a woman thing, as opposed to the, offering to assault a reporter thing. Like the fact of the matter is, he was like, I'll give you. He basically said to someone, I'll give you a slap. And the even though you're a woman thing to me doesn't really mean anything. Because all that's saying is normally I wouldn't slap you because you're a woman. That's in terms of how the sexism in the world. That's really not a big thing.
But even as a phrase, as the whole quote,
as the whole thing goes.
You say assaulting a reporter, a slap is hardly going to knock her out, is it? And no, but I'm just saying. Not
with that lack of commitment.
It's not going to actually. Firstly, he's just joking. He's not even in it in the first place. Secondly, a slap is just nothing. So I don't want to put my opinions on this too much, but
Oh, don't you? Really?
But
A slap is nothing. Yeah, everyone who suffered domestic abuse is going to love you for that.
I don't think one slap constitutes as abuse. But anyway, bearing that in mind,
Just
do you think?
Just carry on.
Do you think? Maybe we'll go to Chris with this one. But like the whole quote, do you think that it makes him a misogynist or indeed an advocate of abuse? Because I'm just asking the question.
I mean, I take your stance that he didn't mean it, but even so, you shouldn't be saying this sort of stuff. It was Vicky Sparks, wasn't it, for the BBC? She saw the funny
Sparker, you know.
Me.
From posh people.
She managed to see the funny side, which is fine. But I feel like had she taken that the wrong way, this could have been far more serious for David Moyes. But I will say that this is perhaps the most fight that he has shown with Sunderland all bloody season.
You've been waiting so long to say that, haven't you?
You've been preparing that since the start of this.
Yeah.
He's frozen.
I literally only came up with it about 20 seconds ago.
Oh, okay.
But it's only taken this long because of how much my computer's lag.
He actually said that 50 minutes ago, but we've only just got it. The thing is about the whole situation, I struggle with it because...
As I was saying, it was taking so long because of how much my computer is lagging.
Can you hear Alex talking, Chris?
I don't know if that was just perfectly timed or whether he's just a complete banter legend.
I heard it sounded like bloody...
What is happening?
Right.
What is this?
Right, let me ask a new question.
Chris, right there. Hey, Chris, no, you're not going to talk for the next, a minute or so because I actually do want to say something. And I don't think you know when I'm talking and when I'm not.
Right,
so
new question.
Oh!
All right, fine, carry on.
You just interrupted me and aggressively gave your opinions when I was trying to talk. No, I'll just...
As I was saying...
Right, no. Right, okay. Now, just really quickly, I think that, generally speaking, I think that...
Oh, no.
You know what, Josh, just move on to the next question. I can't be
All right. Okay,
I can't be bothered, it's cursed.
So, penultimate question about David Moyes. Or not so much here, about the topic in general. When Andy Gray was, I say accused, he was recorded saying, him and Richard Keys were recorded saying possibly unsightly things about Sian Massey, the female linesman, and even to Charlotte Jackson, one of his co-presenters. Andy Gray lost his job because of that, and Richard Keys then resigned sort of in protest. Why did he lose his job, and why do you think David Moyes has kept his job? What is the difference? Because they're both really sort of media personalities, even though Moyes is more on the sporting side.
Andy Gray's employers weren't in a relegation battle.
And Andy Gray's employers, more importantly, weren't Sunderland, i.e. will protect... Adam Johnson's a good football player. He might be a nonce, but he's a good football player. So, until he's actually convicted, we'll keep playing him. It's fine. What do you mean the higher board know that he's a nonce? No, it's fine. We'll carry on playing him because he's actually better than a lot of our other players. It's Sunderland. Come on. I don't want to bash on Mackems in general because... I'm not saying all Sunderland supporters, everyone in Sunderland is a terrible person, but Sunderland don't have a history of, particularly caring about controversial circumstances when it comes to their players and managers and keeping them on board. I think that if there possibly other clubs that were, more potential, had more of a brand to protect, might be more careful with it. But I think the addition of having a club that runs that way, that we already know, and the point that Chris was starting to make before I very rudely interrupted him, which was that they are in a relegation battle and having consistency around this time is kind of important, is perhaps the reason. Whereas, Andy Gray working for Sky or BBC? Sky. Sky, a bit of a bigger brand than Sunderland Football Club. And I think that is perhaps, just the brand that they have to protect is perhaps the reason why there was a difference between the two.
Okay. And a final question on David Moyes. I'll give this to you, Chris, if you're still here. Back to David Moyes is something that Alex and both you have touched on. Taking this sexism issue aside for a second, is he still lucky to be in his job based on Sunderland's form?
definitely. Yeah. I'm not even going to risk it.
Oh my god.
Right, so leaving that topic there,
It's quality punditry, that.
can I just say that I'm so glad that I didn't call this one of the best episodes ever at the beginning, because it really isn't.
It's the most
Blame Chris,
confusing.
man. I've been trying my best to keep this afloat, but Chris's internet is struggling.
Right, so I think
The potato is running low.
Oh,
you made that joke a week when it wasn't funny, then it's not funny now.
No, it's taken a week to catch up.
Okay, so I think just for time issues, if nothing else, just to spare Chris's internet for a minute, we're coming on to we'll leave David Moyes there. Might be sexist. I don't think he is. You guys think he might be. We'll come to our second dugout debate of the episode, and potentially in fitting with talking about David Moyes and his spells at either Sunderland or Manchester United, we're going to discuss who we think are the worst managerial appointments in the Premier League era. And that's not necessarily the worst managers, just appointments at that moment in time for the club and thinking about it retrospectively as well. So Alex, we'll start with you this time. Who's your pick?
I'm going to go for somebody who Chris is very familiar with. Well, not really. He's about 20 games familiar with, as are the rest of the Aston Villa fans. And that's Remy Gard. And I'm going to say this from both like a perspective of they shouldn't have appointed him in the first place and how he's justified the fact that he shouldn't have been appointed in the first.
Oh, he's gone now.
A man with a great deal of managerial experience. Wait, can you not hear me?
You went for a second, it's fine.
Oh, did I? Sorry. But anyway, this was not a guy who had a great deal of managerial experience. He'd managed Lyon for, 1 or 2 seasons, and he won the Coupe de France. Fair play. He won a trophy, whatever. But he won a trophy with a very strong Lyon side, and being appointed from Aston Villa, he'd been out of management for about a season and a half, I think, potentially 2 seasons for personal reasons. And he came into a job at a club that were already going to struggle to stay up. Already, like, from the start of the season, were basically going to be in a relegation battle, with absolutely no knowledge of the English game, with no knowledge of how to manage a club in any league that was struggling to stay up. Like I say, the only team he'd managed was Lyon, who, sitting pretty comfortably near the top of the French league every season. And, I mean, so at that point, you're looking at a guy who you're coming in, you have absolutely no confidence in. And a Villa team that are already struggling are going to come in and have absolutely no confidence in this manager. And I'm just trying to find his managerial record, but if I'm not wrong, I think he had something like a 12 or 15% winning ratio, and I'll find out while the other guys are looking at it so I can actually bring it up and tell you guys what the actual statistics are.
I think he ended up only having 3 wins in all competitions.
Yeah, I think anyway, regardless, out of all the managers that had 20 games or more in charge of a team, he was the third manager of the Premier League era with the 3rd worst win record in the entire league, and I think that says a lot as to how bad he actually was. So I'll actually go and find some actual statistics to back myself up so I look like less of an idiot, and I'll pass it on to one of you guys. But that's a gist of why I'm going with Remy Gard.
Okay, and you, Chris, who you gone for?
I've opted for the best coach in the Premier League, John. He was appointed after Pardew left to take charge of Crystal Palace, of course. He had been sort of Pard's second in command while he was at Newcastle. But Pardew had already started to lose the dressing room before he ended up going to Palace, of course. So perhaps appointing his sort of protege is not really the best choice to gee up a team who are in a relegation battle. And his only managerial, in the proper hot seat before then, was in the MLS with Toronto FC, who he led to the dizzy heights of 3rd bottom in the MLS.
that was a class description, I have to say.
So, to save the club in the most competitive league in the world.
But the Chinese Super League.
The 3rd bottom.
And the SPL.
He
obviously the SPL very competitive.
went on to only win 3 games out of his 20, so on the same par as Remy Gard. But he also ended up going on a run of 8 consecutive league defeats, which is a Premier League record for Newcastle.
Nice.
So,
Source Wikipedia.
it was never good. He was literally only banking on the fact that he'd known Sir Bobby Robson at some point, and he was from Newcastle. I'm going to settle into the break.
I knew the impressions are going to come out sooner or later.
That's only part of why I'm picking.
He's just building up so you can just do the impression. You know he's just building up so you can just do it. Just do the impression. Get out of the way.
What, that he's the best coach in the Premier League?
I'm expecting an impression within yours as well, John.
I don't even know what mine sounds like, I'll be honest with you. Right, I'm going for the guy who Charlton are going to name a stand and a statue after. The mighty, the big man mountain, who is former Charlton athletic manager and FA technical director, Leslie Reed, who was in charge...
I can't deal with it when you say his name in full. Leslie.
Use it as full name.
Who was in charge of the Addicts for a massive 7 games.
Oh, it's over. It's over for you.
No, that's not the best of it. He was in charge. He was in charge for 6 weeks. He won.
Les, if you're watching, I'm so sorry.
He's the sorry one.
Unless Les has moved to Burundi, he's not watching.
Right. So he won 1 game, drew 5, and lost 1. So he gave him a win percentage of just over 14.25%, source Wikipedia. In the season where Charlton, he was the second of 3 managers in their relegation season. Ian Dowie had picked up the baton from Alan Kirbishley at the beginning of the 06-07 season. Despite the fact that he in turn had been relegated with Palace 2 seasons before, he left the squad in like Dick Cochran.
Les Reed is so bad.
I think I found this one as well.
Yeah, it's over.
That's my first.
It's over. Oh my god. You've literally broken him. You've broken him. Let's read. Guys, right, this is what Let's Read does. He breaks clubs and he breaks people. This is the Let's Read effect. Oh my god.
If only the Charlton fans could laugh at him so much.
I think they probably do.
You're making me laugh.
Oh my god. This is derailed so
He
quickly.
got sacked before his second rent was even due. That's how short his tenure at Charlton was.
Josh, just saying, this is why we don't do 2 dugout debates, because we don't have the brain capacity to do this. And Chris is frozen again, and it's all going wrong. Oh my god.
It's got nothing to do with brain capacity. It's about that Chris is dying just by me saying, if I say let's read.
God.
Oh my god. Josh, mate, I think we should just call it, to be honest.
He never played a professional match in his life.
Josh, call it.
He'd never managed in his life before.
Josh, we know.
I'm not fitting. He'd been assistant manager at a few different teams, and like in the backroom stuff. Oh, so quite why Charlton board thought he would be suitable for a Premier League relegation battle is quite frankly beyond me.
This isn't even a debate anymore. We're just going through shit managers and saying why they're shit.
It's just
Josh, with the greatest respect, we know who's winning this. There's no debate here, okay? Look, you've got Remy Gone. Yeah, he was shit for Villa, okay? He had 20 games in charge, then he won 10% of them. I've totally forgotten who the fuck Chris even went with. But you went with...
to the Premier League.
But
You forgot the impression
you went
made.
with Les... You've gone with Les Reed. Chris went with his just so he could pull out a shitty impression. I went with mine because I picked mine 2 minutes beforehand and you picked Les Bloody Reed, okay? There's no debate here. There's no points we can make against you here. You picked a man who lasted 6 weeks in his job and won 1 of his 7 games.
In fairness, Les Reed didn't sack the man who'd kept the club up and then had come back from cancer. He didn't sack him over the phone, to be fair.
Yeah, but that just makes John Cobb an arsehole. Les Reed might be the nicest bloke in the world. Doesn't make him not a rubbish Premier League managerial appointment.
Well, I suppose that's why Charlton are naming the stand after it.
And the best thing about Les Reed is that when he sat in the dugout, he used to wear a headset like mine.
What?
I don't know.
Now you all know who Josh's inspiration is. It's Les
Yeah.
Reed.
Yeah, he said, I win.
fairness-
I win. He doesn't.
In fairness, Josh, you've done a similarly effective job of keeping this dugout debate under control as he did.
I'm
keeping
taking
his
no
players.
responsibility for that Chris can't contain himself just at the name Les Reed.
Josh, cool it. It's done. The debate's over. The
I think
debate's
Chris is just
over.
going to fish.
I think
The
I think
debate
this
is
has been,
over when I decide, and I've decided it's
I think this has
over.
been this has been the best episode of the
My
Dugout
dear God.
debate yet.
This has been 45 minutes of... Oh my God, this has just been a Chris laughing fest. Right. I don't think anyone actually really cares who won this
Guys.
dugout debate. We know it's
That's the
me.
second time
We
you've
know
done
it's me. Oh, Alex, don't do this to me. Right.
He's the best pundit on the Dugout debate.
Okay, I've won both the dugout debates today. That's over and done with. Thank you for choosing in the dugout. We don't know quite why you've done that. If you're still here 45 minutes later...
If you've lasted this long.
If you've lasted longer than Les Reed
Fair
lasted at Charlton, then quite frankly, fair play.
Oh my God.
Can I just say, the dugout debate has lasted longer than Les Reed lasted at Charlton. Fact.
Yeah.
Oh. Join us next week for episode 10 when Alex will be taking the reins once again. But until then, thanks for watching and goodbye.
See ya.
Have a bloody game.
Oh my God, Chris. Jesus Christ. Oh.
Oh my God.
For more footballing news and views, like, follow, share and subscribe.